All right, so either you can do whatever I'm going to show you this in Photoshop, you can also do this in Lightroom. I prefer Lightroom for this because just slightly the workflow is much easier to understand, and most people do this inside Lightroom, okay? Now, you open up the 3 shots. So HDR, remember, is taken like this. So I've got 3 shots of a shot I took in Vagator Beach in Goa. Let me just open this up. So this, and I think I showed you this shot before also. We're going to be working with this shot throughout this section. So it's going to be pretty important, okay? So here's how HDR editing is done. Remember, now you know that it's usually done in areas where we have a lot of contrast. For example, here I definitely had that since I was, since the sky was really blown out and the foreground was coming dark. So I've taken one of the shots like this, but it starts off with a middle shot like this. So we have 3 shots here. This is the middle one where kind of have an okay exposure for everything, and here my light meter was something in the center, and the process is very simple. I'm actually going to be showing you once we go out on the field how to take the HDR shots also, because we're going to be using a technique called as bracketing. I'll just be talking about that. But basically, here's the thing. For example, I'm just giving an example. Let's say my aperture here is f13, my ISO is 100. Let's keep those settings aside, and like we've discussed before, you keep changing your shutter speed to change the exposure. For example, this was at the center, then I took 1 by decreasing by making the shutter speed faster. That cuts down the light. This mainly we're doing it to get the colors in the sky. Okay. Unfortunately, here I did not have clouds. Okay, but that would have probably made this shot much better. But at least we had these nice colors going on because this was almost during the golden hours. And through this technique, as you're going to find out, like we've discussed before, we won't even have to make use of any graduated filters. Like when I was shooting, I did not use one. Okay, so this was the underexposed shot, the middle one, and one for the foreground. Okay, so here you can see that I've really overexposed the shot, and here the sky just completely goes for a toss. So we have these 3 shots. So now the question is, how do we combine them? That's what HDR editing basically means, that you have to merge them so that we get this one merged shot inside our editing software, which actually has the details of all these 3 shots. Okay, so you're going to see this process. Because I can, for example, the alternative is I can take the middle shot and turn down the highlights, increase the shadows. I'll kind of get closer to that HDR look like how we've done it before also. But if you just work with one shot, the data is limited. Therefore, the final output may not be as good as you wished for, because your editing software will have to manipulate a lot of things to compensate for that, less data that it has to work with. So if we use the data from all 3 images, that's your best bet in order to get these shots out. Though, trust me, it can be done from one shot also. I know some photographers who do it, but when the contrast is high, it's always the safer option to click multiple shots. And just before I start this editing process, later on in the field, I'll be showing you how you can do this by using a very easy process in your camera called as bracketing. That means you won't even have to manually change your shutter speed every time you take a new shot. Through bracketing, all you will have to do is just take 3 shots and the shutter speed will automatically be changed by your camera. I'll talk about that later. It's a very, very fast process. Literally takes like 3 to 4 seconds to complete these 3 shots. Okay. So in fact, later on, I'll actually be showing you a complete workflow of what you have to do when you're out there shooting in the field. And we will be following that workflow step by step so that there's no room for any subjectivity. Okay. So I'm going to select all 3. You can either hold down Control and you can just select, make sure all 3 are highlighted like this. Okay. So all 3 are highlighted. I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to click on Photo Merge here. Okay. And then I'm going to select HDR. So what's going to happen is Lightroom will just render these 3 shots now, and it's going to give us a merged preview first of all, okay, like this. So you can see now it is combined. Now you must be thinking, Kush, I can't really see any difference here. So right now it has not applied any editing settings. It's just that, think of it like this. It has compiled all that data from the underexposed, overexposed and the middle shot here. It is up to us now that we will be able to easily edit this. But before I open this in the editing panel, which is the develop panel here, I first of all want to just talk about some of the settings here because these can be important. First is this setting which says auto align. Make sure this is always checked. This mainly means that if there was any movement between these 3 shots, usually there should not be, because ideally you will be using a tripod, so the composition will remain the same. But even with a tripod, you never know, right? Sometimes things can just move a bit. For example, just see this. If I remove this, can you just see there's a bit of movement in the shot? Like something has just gone, kind of, it just compressed there a bit, right? When you select auto align, we are 100% making sure that even if there was like that tiny movement, it is compensated for it, and all these three images are now absolutely technically aligned in the perfect manner. Okay, so make sure this is set to on, and definitely if you're not using a tripod, this has to be set to on. Okay, you should not be doing that, by the way, but anyway, just a point. Next is, if I want to click on auto settings, if I don't have too much time to edit this myself, I can actually click on auto settings, and Lightroom will just, do this whole editing on this HDR image on its own. And you can see it does a pretty okay job, but where's the fun in that? We want to do this manually, so I don't go for this. I just leave this unchecked. We are going to absolutely develop this on our own, okay? Now this next option is a bit of a tricky option. It says Deghost amount. What does this mean, okay? So let's just take a scenario, like a sample. Let's say I was shooting these three shots, and maybe in the third shot, let's say, or any of the shots, there's a good chance that maybe a bird can fly in the shot, right? Or maybe some person just suddenly came in the shot. Now what has happened is, if that happens, you have two frames in which nothing is there, but in the third frame you have this bird, okay, which was flying across the sky. Now what happens is, when you do this, when you merge these three shots using Lightroom's own algorithm, what sometimes in these cases it can happen is that you might get like a ghost blurred look of that bird, okay, because maybe the algorithm was not able to figure out that that was not needed. So you might see like a patch of that bird here. This is where deghosting can just remove that. So if you set deghosting to none, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to look out for anything which is uncommon between these three shots. But I can also have this. So if I had, for example, a lot of variance between these three shots, okay, I can select high level, medium level according to that. Maybe it was just a small obstacle which came, I can select low. Sometimes you don't know which one works the best. You just have to click on all three and try which one works the best, and you'll get a preview here. If the thing disappears, your job is done. So in usual circumstances, this is pretty easy to use, okay? But in this particular image, what is happening is, the water obviously won't be the same between three shots. Even though I might have taken it very fast using the bracketing method, which I'm going to talk about later, it's still water, right? Water really moves very rapidly. So between these three shots, there's a good chance that these ripples that you're seeing might have been different. That also has to be, you kind of have to consider that when it comes to deghosting, that how does Lightroom figure this out, that which of these shots to take this from? Is it merging it together? So first of all, here's the trick for this when water is involved. First, try none. That means we are telling Lightroom, don't apply any sort of deghosting. Don't put your algorithm to test when it comes to this image. We are happy with what we are getting. For that, what you have to do is just click on this plus icon, like anywhere on the image. Go through the entire parts of this water, okay? Like this. You'll have to be careful. I'm right now just going a bit fast. Just make sure you don't see anything weird happening, okay? If you don't see, then just leave it at none, okay? If you do see some artifacts, okay, and I'm going to show you how they look also. That means Lightroom, without deghosting, that means when it's set to none, has not been able to do a good job. Then you might have to try these. Here we are not facing any problem. I can actually go ahead with none. But I want to show you that sometimes actually clicking on them can introduce those artifacts which I'm talking about. So let's have a look. So for example, if I click on low, okay, just see, there's going to be a change. Lightroom is now deliberately trying to see, okay, maybe Kush is clicking on low. That means in the original image, when none was selected, something has gone wrong. So let's try to remove any sort of variance in this ripples, okay? So let's see if it does a good job. Now, right now, you can't really make out too much. There was some change in the water. So what you can do is you can just click this option which says show deghost overlay. If I click on it, it actually shows you where all did it make the changes, okay? Now I can zoom in and see how this is looking, okay? So I know, okay, the changes are somewhere here. So let's uncheck this option to just kind of see in a much better way. Can you see now? Suddenly the water is very nice here, but just see what it has done in this area. It doesn't look uniform, right? It looks really bad. From one of the images, it has taken something from one of the images. So sometimes clicking this can actually lead to artifacts. So it's a hit and miss. You sometimes just have to go through all the options, okay? Because that's the problem with water. It's not like a normal obstacle like a bird flying or a person coming, okay? So here you can see low is not doing a good job. Let's see with medium. So with medium, it's just going to increase the intensity of what its algorithm is doing. But here also you can see we get this bad looking patch. So what it's trying to basically do is it's trying to combine the different parts of that water from different images, okay? And you can see if I click on high, so actually what happens is, and I've read this on the Lightroom's own tutorial guide that they have, what it does is when you actually do this, like for example, here you can see that it's actually try to do that almost on a lot of image on the high range. Wherever basically you see this, okay, the red part, it actually is taking this part from the metered image. Now, what is a metered image? The image in the center, the base image that you had where you clicked with the light meter in the center. That's where it is majority, its algorithm is taking this part from, okay? But if you don't want to understand that, it's okay. That's perfectly fine. All you have to know is, do you see artifacts or not? So here maybe it's okay, because if I just click this, I'm not really noticing anything bad here, okay? It's mainly taken the entire thing from the metered image, so it's fine. But here's the thing, if none is giving you best, just leave it at none, okay? We don't want to mess with any algorithm, because maybe somewhere it will even affect the image quality, because something is happening. So why do it at the first place if none was giving you an absolutely fine thing, okay? So again, it's a hit and miss. There's really no solution to this. Trust me, I've tried researching this a lot. When it comes to ripples, go through them all. And in normal circumstances, some people came, something else came, it'll just do a good job when you select either of these. There also, just try these three, okay? So we're going to select none. And now all we have to just do is, you can just ignore this option right now, which says create stack. Don't worry about that. Just click on merge. And this is just going to render all of these three into, you'll see a fourth image come here, which will be like a merged of all three with the data of all three images, okay? Like this one. And this is the image which we are going to develop. So we're going to click on develop, and now we have this image which looks like one of these three images, but it's not. It's a combination. Think of it like a super image that we have in front of us, and it's up to us to really get the best out of this image. And this process, obviously, as you can guess, is a lot of fun. So let's do that. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do here, and by the way, if you really want to get good with literally each element that you're seeing here inside Lightroom, I really urge you to check out my Lightroom for Beginners course, because there I don't leave any stone unturned. You learn the A to Z of Lightroom in its entirety with almost, I think we have over 20 to 25 images which you get for practice also. So do check that course out if you really want to learn. Here I'm just going to be going a bit fast, okay? Mainly concentrating on the landscape photography part of it. So one of the first things that you'll do inside Lightroom is, let me just close these panels first of all, because I use Lightroom a lot, so these panels are usually open. So if I click on lens corrections here, the first thing you want to do is enable profile corrections. It'll just remove any distortion that you face from an image. Okay, because here I'm using a wide angle lens, 16 to 35 f4 by Nikon. I've already talked about that lens. These wide angle lenses sometimes can cause distortions like we've talked before. So we can just click on this option, enable profile corrections, and you can see it just removes that distortion. It automatically figures out that I was using this particular lens. Also check this option which says remove chromatic aberration. This just means on the edges, sometimes, especially if you're using cheap lenses, you might see something what we call as fringing. Here, let me see. We can't really see it on the edges here. You might see some like purple colors on the edges sometimes, especially if you're using your kit lens and all. But even if you're using a good lens, just check it. It's just going to remove that fringing on the edges. That's what chromatic aberration is, okay? Once you've clicked on these two options, let me just close this so we get a bigger workspace. Now, we're just going to quickly straighten this shot. This is one of the things I always repeat to my students, that never forget to straighten your shot. Even if it results in a bit of cropping, it's fine. An unstraightened shot is like a sin in landscape photography. So what you can do is just take this ruler here and just draw a straight line wherever you see a straight line like this. And it's just going to do this. We are going to lose a bit here, okay? So that's fine. But at least we get a straight image, and this looks just much, let's say the word is formal, okay, or more professional rather. Okay, so I like this. I think maybe I can even just rotate it here. So you can even manually just do it. And now my OCD is kicking in, so do forgive me for this. I think, yeah, now it's fine. And now is the time, let's take care of the exposure parts, right? Because that is pretty much the main reason why we use HDR, so that we don't have to use those fancy filters, right? So first of all, let's try to raise the shadows here for the foreground. Now we are, remember, working with the 3 images. So we have a lot of detail. So you can see I can actually literally overexpose this shot. There's so much of detail inside the shot. And on top of that, by the way, these 3 are raw images. So we literally right now are dealing with the maximum, probably the maximum possible quality that we can deal with, okay? So you can see here, we have been able to do a good job. I'm going to be slightly quick about it. Then of course, to save this, we're going to reduce our highlights. And now here you may not see too much of a difference. So we are going to tackle this separately because, like I said, the sky was pretty bland that day. I did not really have too many clouds that day, but you can still see it saves a lot of colors, okay? So anytime you want to see the before and after, you can just press the backslash key, which is just, on the right side of the keyboard above enter, and you can see before and after, right? Already making a big difference. Now here is the time, obviously, remember, we are going to add that filter here, the digital filter. So I'm going to go to masking, linear gradient, and we exclusively are going to pull up this filter and work exclusively on the sky. You can see this literally like putting a filter there, and now I can even decrease the exposure a bit, like just to get that gray sky and nice colors out of it. Like I said, I can do a lot more with it. I can increase the saturation. And since I was shooting this in the golden hours, I always like to add the temperature a bit to the sky to make it slightly warmer like this. Okay, so this is looking absolutely beautiful. You can do a lot of other things right now just to save time. I probably won't. Apart from that, I can also pull out another graduated filter, okay? This time for the foreground. Maybe we selectively want to do some things only on the foreground like this. That's the best part about having digital filters. You can do literally anything. So maybe here, I want to add a lot of clarity so that we get this texture and clarity out of the rocks also, make them more sharp. Not too much because they introduce a bit of noise in the edges and the shot, so you should not go overboard with this. I think this is looking good. Finally, let me see, what can I add here? We can probably, if you remember, just like we discussed about the reverse graduated filter for the sunrise and all, we have something called as a radial gradient, which I'm not a big fan of it, to be frank, but at least I want to show you. But with this filter, you can just think of it like a circular filter that you can put on the sun if you want. Okay, decrease and change its size. You can even feather it, like I just want it to be very subtle right on the sun. And maybe I would just like to decrease the exposure on the sun like this. You can increase it also, decrease it also, make it stronger like this. Some people may prefer that. And actually, to be frank, I like the stronger one here. Okay. So sometimes you just have to experiment. What you had in your mind maybe turns out to be a bit different. Maybe we can even increase the clarity of this a bit. And yeah, so you can see basically what these filters do is whenever you put a filter, that just means you're exclusively working on that area without affecting the other areas. Okay, so I'm going to click on done. Finally, I'm not really going to do too much right now, but let me just give this a nice vignette here. So just going to go over to lens corrections and just add a dark vignette. Okay, I always like to do that just to add some drama to it. And we are facing some flare issues here. You can see here a bit of flare coming here. If you want to remove that, you can always go to this top part which says spot removal, and simply, it's very easy to do this. You can change the size of this by using your square bracket keys and just click on it, and Lightroom will sample this from another area like this, and it'll just remove that. Click on done. Let's check the before and after. Absolutely massive can you see this is not one of those bad looking HDR images which those cheap softwares create, where you just upload the 3 images and then it just gives you a very bad looking result, which for me looks too saturated and almost, it just doesn't look like a professional image. But here, we're doing things the right way. We're working with the right amount of data and pixels, and I think this has been able to do a really good job, and we did not really have to use any sort of graduated filters for this. That is the advantage of using HDR editing, and that's why I feel it's absolutely a must. It's going to be a part of the workflow that you're going to see in phase 3 also. That's how important I feel this is. Anyway, I hope that you like this. We will tackle the technique of focus stacking next.